welcome to my third actually Kerbal Space Program tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to be going to the moon, which actually has just nicely appeared behind Kerbin. So this tutorial is going to split into two parts. The first part is going to be building the lander and the lifting stage to get it into orbit, and then obviously getting it into orbit. And then the second part is then going to be getting to the moon, landing, planting the flag, and then getting back safely. So we're going to start, and so we'll go in career mode, be easier. Right, so one thing that we do have to consider is whereabouts the moon is. So we've got Kerbin here, the moon is here. So basically we've got to get from here to here. Now unfortunately, for us, there's another moon here called Minimus, and actually Minimus is actually sort of, people say it's actually easier to get to than the moon. It's because you don't have to slow yourself down as much as the moon. So we are going to have to sort of put a bit more fuel on our lander than we would have liked, but hopefully in a future video I'll land on Minimus and you can see what difference is in terms of how much fuel you need, if that makes sense. So anyway, we're going to start off with the Command Pod Mark 1, which is standard. That's what we're going to use for pretty much most of our designs. And from the first video, you'll remember that I used a Mark 16 parachute, and that's going to allow us to get back safely. And then we also want, if we go on structural, and the TR-18A stack decoupler, which basically means I can separate off this stage completely, and then this landing module will be able to get back safe and sound. Now you probably noticed actually that I have quite a lot of parts in my sort of subcategories than I did before, and that's just recently because I've installed a new mod called the B9 Aerospace mod, and that's just unlocked loads more parts for space planes and whatnot. So it's a cracking mod. It's really good. And for experience, I sort of recommend it for experienced players, but it's because it can be really challenging to sort of figure out what all the new parts are. But anyway, back to the moon. We're going to add the FLT400 fuel tank onto the bottom, like so, and then we are going to have, because we need a little bit of extra fuel, not that much, but we do need a little bit more. We're going to add two of these. They are the FLT100 fuel tanks on either side of this lander here. So once we've done that, if we go, we're in propulsion, and we need the LV909 liquid engine. Now this was an engine that I mentioned before in one of my videos, and this basically it is sort of like a medium-sized engine, but for landers, because it's small and it's pretty lightweight. If I actually put one on there, so we're just going to put it on the bottom like so. So this LV909 engine, I mentioned it in the first ever video that it's the smallest of the medium-sized engines, and it basically it's quite light and it's good for landers because it has a thrust capacity of 50, which is perfect for this because it'll slow it down very quickly, and we need that when we're landing on the moon. So one vital component that we need in this that we didn't actually have before was these FTX2 external fuel ducts in the propulsion category. And we're going to click on these, and we're going to click on the external fuel tanks we have here, and then pop them to the rocket in the middle. Now this will basically mean that if with these fuel ducts, if you see that arrow going this way, that means when this rocket is fueling, it'll pump fuel out of these fuel tanks, because there's one in each of them, because we've got it on the double symmetry node, into this fuel tank. So these are basically just two little extra fuel tanks that will automatically pump fuel into this fuel tank to use up for this rocket to use. So it's just a little bit of extra fuel that we're using, and we're just going to make that extra stable by going on structural, and if I can find them, here we are, EAS4 strut connectors, and we just make sure we have two of them, and we're just going to put one on the bottom and connect it to the main rocket, just so then we definitely know that these aren't going anywhere. And then once we've done that, we need to add one more vital thing for a lander, because the lander needs to actually be able to land. So if we go over to utility, and we're going to see these LT1 landing struts, and we're going to want, you can have between 3 and 4. I normally think 4 is always a safe bet. You want to try and make sure you have it on 4 symmetry node, obviously, and then line them up as best you can. So you want them as far down as possible, so then you have enough, so then there's plenty of room between the rocket and the ground. So I think that'll do the trick nicely. And then we also need, you don't really actually need this on the moon because there's very little gravity, but on other planets you do, because the rocket thrusters won't work as well on the Kerbals. So here we have the, if it'll actually load, there we are, the Telus LV Bay Mobility Enhancer. Now this is basically just a enclosed ladder that we can use. If we pop it on here, there we are. So when this, so when I open this when I'm there, the little capsule will open, this ladder will come down, so then when the Kerbal gets out of the command pod, it'll just get in the ladder and then go all the way back down onto the ground. And I think that's pretty much it, because we don't really want to have it too complicated, because this is only a basic tutorial, so we're not really we don't need to put any science on it or whatnot, or rover wheels, because I'll come to that in another video. So yes, we're going to name this, if it'll actually, there's some real frame rate problems with Fraps recently. I'm hoping, it seems to be just whenever I'm making the rockets. There we go, and it keeps jumping back to, never mind. Right, moon lander. Okay, so we're going to save that there. Just then we know this works, and we're just going to do a little test flight with this, just with the lander, just to make sure that there aren't any problems. So we're just going to test its landing. See, the frame rate's fine out here. We're just going to test the landing legs. So if we press G on the keyboard, there we are. That extends the landing legs, and we can see that all 4 landing legs support the craft very well. And we're just going to test the rocket to make sure it's got enough thrust to accelerate this rocket upwards. So if we just press T to put on the SAS, press spacebar to activate the engine, and throttle up using the left-hand shift key. Okay, so as we can see, the LV909 is clearly, it's struggling really to lift this. It does lift it, to lift this lander off the surface of Kerbal. Now, although this is not ideal, this is fine, because when we're in the moon, obviously the gravity is a lot less, so this potentially weighs much less. So, but the thrust on the rocket stays the same. So even though this may look like it's struggling quite a lot to move this thing, this rocket will be about 5 times more effective on the moon. So long as this actually takes off, and even then if it doesn't take off, you know, this actually rocket engine will do fine. So I'm just gonna do some acrobatics. Whee! See if I can still land this thing. Ooh. Oh, we'll be fine. I'll accelerate a bit more. Oh dear. Oh my god. That actually worked. Oh, okay, and now you crash. That makes no sense. Anyway, if we just recover the vessel, so then we can start over. Right, so we go back into the vehicle assembly building. We can clearly see that our lander works well. So last time this is a different kind of rocket we're building. We're building a rocket with 2 separate stages, because before we just had 1 separate middle stage and that did all the work, whereas now we're going to need 2 stages because we need the extra fuel. So in this now we're going to have our main, we're obviously going to have the lander, we're going to have the middle stage, which is going to get us to the moon, and then we're going to have the lifting stage, which is going to get us into orbit, if that makes sense. So what we need to do is we need to add a decoupler to the bottom of the rocket, like so. And this will actually, as you can see, it actually covers the rocket with a plating. Now this just makes it more aerodynamic, and it looks better in my opinion as well. So now that our engine's covered, as soon as the static decoupler goes, this plating around it will also vanish, will also separate off as well, so therefore we're just left with the engine at the back. So we're going to need a little lifting stage to get us to the moon. And we don't actually need that much thrust to get us to the moon, so all we're going to have is let's go for, I'll have a smaller fuel tank here, and then once we have that, we're going to have a LVT30, T45. We're going to have an LVT45 just because of the gimbaling that I mentioned in the first video. So this is going to be our middle stage, and this is going to get us from orbit to the moon. So we're going to need to move this up a little bit more, and then we're going to need to cover this with another decoupler like we did before, like so. Now, if you can't already guess, this is going to be quite heavy. I'm not going to calculate exactly how heavy it is, but it's going to be relatively heavy. I mean, this large rocket fuel what is it? Tank. There we go. A tank. Why did I forget the word? Weighs 4.5 tons on its own. So, you know, with everything else, including the lander, you know, we've got a bit of weight under here. So we're going to need quite a substantial lifting stage. Now, we're going to move up now to the larger rockets, so the larger engines and the larger fuel tanks. So for this, we're going to have what's called a Rockomax adapter, because the larger parts are called Rockomax. I'm guessing that's just what the company that makes them is called, but we're going to have this thing here. It's under the structural tab called the Rockomax brand adapter. Now there's a few of these. We've got this larger one here, or there is this one as well. If I just put that on there as well, that does exactly the same job. I personally think that one looks more effective as well, because it gives you more space to use struts, because we're going to need to use a lot of those. So we're going to use this Rockomax brand adapter, and this basically allows us to attach now larger pieces to a smaller rocket. So with that, we're going to have one of these Rockomax Jumbo 64 fuel tanks. This is actually the largest fuel tank that you can get, and we're not just going to leave this on its own, because we're going to be using these Rockomax mainsail engines. Now, if I put one of these on the bottom, you can see that it's a bit of a monster. Engine max power of 1,500 kilonewtons of thrust, whereas this one only has 50 kilonewtons of thrust. So you can see the difference between them. But for some strange reason that no one can really explain, when you have a Rockomax engine attached to a jumbo fuel tank, it overheats and up to a stage where it can explode. But if we were to have it so, we take that off, and we put one of the smaller Rockomax fuel tanks on it, and put that on there, that will now no longer explode. It will actually it won't really overheat at all, actually. So no one can really understand why. It just seems to be sort of, not really a bug with the game, but just a different, it's a different mechanic. No one really sure why, but that's the case, so we're just going to get over it. So as you can see, that already this rocket is marginally a lot larger than the one that we built to get the probe into space, or just to get our first ever basic flight. But it doesn't get much more complicated than this, but we're basically just going to, this on its own, as well as being unstable in lower atmosphere, is not going to have enough fuel or thrust to get all this into orbit. So we're going to need it to enlist the help of some more thrusters. Now to do that, we're going to be using the TT70 radial decoupler that I mentioned in one of my previous videos, and we're only just going to have one of them, because we're going to build this stage out here, and then we're going to click on this and then basically duplicate it and then put it around. So we're just going to build this here for now. So we're going to have another Rockomax jumbo tank, make sure that that's on the middle like so, so then all of it is connected to the fuel tank, because we don't want to have an unstable platform. So once that's like that, we're going to add a tiny Rockomax X208 fuel tank, which is a smaller one of the bottom ones, because we don't need as much fuel in these other stages. So we're going to have this Rockomax mainsail engine, and then we're going to need to what we're going to have is, at the start, we're going to have, because I'm going to duplicate this 4 times around the rocket, all these, the 4 external engines and the middle engine are going to fire at the same time, so we're not carrying an engine with dead weight. But while that's doing that, we're going to have these tanks are going to be feeding fuel into the central tank. So when these 4 fuel tanks around the outside burn out, this fuel tank will still be full, even though this rocket's been firing. So it's just a more sort of efficient way to get into space. So we're going to have this fuel line coming from here to here. So to make sure it goes from that tank to that tank, you've got to do that one first and that one second. If you do that one first and that one second, it'll start feeding the fuel from this tank out to these outer tanks, and that's just going to be a disaster. So make sure it's from this one to that one. And then if we go into structural and find the EAS4 strut connectors, we're going to be using 2 of these. Oh, actually, just one. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's just one. Yeah, we just want one for the time being, and we're going to put one on each side on the top, connecting to the bottom, and each one on the bottom, connecting to that central stage. Now, one problem that you can actually have with using different fuel tanks is that the bit in between them isn't completely stable. So what we're going to do actually is just, if we click on this one here, and then we're going to click on this one here, and if you can't actually see the strut, I don't know if I'll be able to zoom in and see it. Yeah, if you look in here now, we can actually see the strut here. It's connected to the bottom fuel tank and actually comes up into the second fuel tank, and this will basically just keep these 2 fuel tanks together, because especially using this huge engine, these 2 tanks can wobble and become separated. So we're just going to have I'll have 2 struts, so one on each side, just to really reinforce it some more. So that one's gone all the way up there, but it doesn't matter so long as it keeps these 2 fuel tanks together. I'm going to do that actually on the central one. I'm actually going to use 2 to see if it just does it on that side as well. Yes, it does. So therefore this tank will remains attached to that tank. So now that we have this external one set up, we're going to click on the adapter, because that's going to move the whole of the setup. We're going to put it here, and then we're going to press the X key twice on your keyboard to make 4 of them, and oops, hang on, and click, and there we go. So we now have all 4 external thrusters added to the bottom section, and this is going to allow further thrust to get into the atmosphere. So just one finishing touch I like to do. I never really see anyone else doing it, but whenever I've done this, it seems to help. I'm just going to attach all these external ones together in like a sort of like a square in a sense, because sometimes these can start sort of rattling about, but if you're attached to each other, the whole thing rattles about, so it's more stable. I don't think that makes sense, but it does seem to work, so just bear with me on that one. Okay, so now that we've done that, I don't think we'll need anything else. Let me just, actually, I have installed one mod which will allow me to see the thruster weight ratio of this rocket. So if I just add a mech jab to that, let's do vessel information. Right, surface total weight ratio is 2.5. Delta V stats. Doesn't help. Right, so this vessel information. Its mass thrust is 7,500 kilonewtons, but that's including that extra engine. That's fine. So surface to thrust to weight ratio is 2.57, which is absolutely fine. That'll do us nicely. But just to then we definitely make sure that we've got enough, we're just going to add some of the solid fuel boosters that I showed in the second video. So we're going to have, if we go to the structural and go to the TT radial decoupler again, because we want these to we want to be able to get rid of these when they run out of fuel. And we're going to go to the propulsion and go to the Rockermax BACC solid fuel booster, making sure that's right down the center. And then we're just going to add some struts to them. If we're on structural. And for these, because they're only small, we just have one on each. So one on the right at the top, and then one on the left at the bottom. So that's enough to keep that in place. So therefore, if we then click on this, press Alt 3 times to get it to 4 times symmetry, and there we go. So now we have a perfectly good lifting stage. So there's a couple of finishing touches. If you've noticed already, then I'm very proud of you. We need the launch stability enhancers, because bouncing on all these mainsail engines is not a good idea. So because this is quite heavy, we're going to need quite a few of them. So have these 4 here. Well, actually, I think that'll be enough. Yeah, that'll probably be enough, because the whole craft is quite stable enough. Just going to move this down a little bit to make sure, just so it's low enough. That's fine. We've added struts, stability enhancers. We've got the fuel ducts. Oh yes, we are missing something. So as you can see, I don't know about you, but this is going to wobble a lot. When we're going through the atmosphere, the only thing that's connecting this whole column to this bottom section is this tiny little decoupler, and that isn't very strong. So when we're flying, this is going to wobble, and this could potentially break, and then we lose everything, and that's not what we want. So we want to make sure that we have some struts attached. There we are. Some EAS4 strut connectors. Now we're also going to attach, like I said before, with this Rockomax brand adapter, it's actually better for attaching struts. So if we put these on the bottom, so we've got the largest clearance, and we're going to move these up and sort of have them as on the central stage here, because it doesn't really matter if we have them at the lander, because this is the majority of it, because this will be strong enough to hold this bit. It's just not strong enough to hold the whole of it. So if we have these struts here, this will stop this from wobbling. And then as well as that, we're going to have these strut connectors on as well the tops of these fuel tanks, because it's going to be the most unstable going through the thickest part of the atmosphere. So if we have these here, we're only going to put these about halfway here. So now this is now helping support this with a sort of a larger clearance, and these are also helping support it during the entry into space. I'm sorry about that, guys. My hard drive actually ran out of memory, so I had to go and delete some stuff and delete some stuff and sort of carry on with this. So we're running out of time a little bit. So I'm actually going to split this into 3 parts because I didn't think the building of this rocket would take so long. Yes. These strut connectors have now made this rocket more stable, and the only thing we have now left to do is to fix the staging. So we want these 4 to fire at the same time, and then we need these 4 external to fire at the start. We want the stability enhancers to start firing. We want the middle rocket to start firing. And okay, so that's the first stage done. And then the second stage, we want to lose these extra fuel boosters, which it does. That's fine. Second stage, we want to lose these, which it does. Third stage, we want to go to this, which it does. And then fifth stage, we want to ignite that. It does. And then sixth stage, get rid of that. And then yes, that's absolutely fine. And I've actually just realised one pretty important part of this is, actually, if I just get rid of that, is that we don't have advanced SAS on this at the minute. We do not have it. That's something that I have just remembered that we don't have. So if I'm just going to move this whole bit of the rocket down, and if we go onto control and get an incline advanced stabilizer, like so, which allowed us to have power to the rocket, and as well, just to make sure that we don't run out of electricity, because this LV909 rocket doesn't produce electricity. So that is one thing to note while using it. We're going to have just put 2 solar panels on the top of this rocket, which is on utility, and these OXstat photovoltaic panels. Okay guys, so I think this is ready to go. So we're going to press launch instead of save. It's auto-saved, so it's fine. Oh dear. What the hell just happened? Blimey, hang on, let's go back to vehicle assembly. What the hell just happened? Okay, so if we save this, okay, we're going to load it again, and hopefully it won't just randomly destroy itself. Why is it doing that? What? That's never happened to me before. Oh, well, this is awkward. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to try and iron out this bug that we keep having, and I will see you in the next episode where we get this into space. Thanks for watching, guys. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and cheers.